Again. All right, everyone. Well, welcome back. I hope you had a really lovely break. We're going to have a great hour and a half or so right now. We have invited a number of Stoic coaches for our coaching courage panel and workshop. And leading this panel is Andi Sharpe. Andi, I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself and then hand it over to the Stoics. I'll start doing some tech stuff like spotlighting everyone so we can all see you. And have a great couple of hours of coaching, everyone in the room. Over to you, Andi.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So I'm here today. I am really excited about this panel. As mentioned in the introductions, I am part of the Modern Stoicism Steering Committee. I really enjoy working with this particular group of people over the last several weeks as we've prepared for this incredible conference that Catherine and Brittany have planned. We're going to have an exciting series of events right now. We're going to start with some discussion. I will call on each of our Stoic coaches to introduce themselves. I will call by first name, and then they're going to take you through a little bit of storytelling. So part of their introduction is going to include the incorporation of how courage has impacted them in some way. So we're going to take some time to really hear from each panelist. Time permitting, I have a couple of questions in my quiver ready to pose if we have time for that. And then we're going to break into breakout groups. And so you will be assigned random selection groups with one of the coaches or two of the coaches, depending on group size. There will be a 30-minute activity. You might be journaling, you might be in conversation. We'll talk a little bit more about that. If you're someone who prefers to stay muted and just listen, there's space for you there. We are celebrating all types of learning and conversation styles in this event, and really glad that you're here. So we'll go through each panelist. They'll introduce themselves again, share some thoughts. I know some folks have slides and we'll do screen share. Other will be more just chatting through the microphone. As Anne mentioned earlier, if you have a question, put it in the chat. Just type the word question in all caps, and then we will take it from there. So my screen appears to be frozen. Are you able to hear me okay? Someone could give me a thumbs up in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe just a bit delayed, hopefully not robotic and choppy. But the first person we're going to call on will be Katie, and Katie will share her story with you. If each of our panelists could say first and last name as part of their introduction, and then go into their stories of courage, I think that would be a great way for us to begin. So if I could ask Katie to come off mute and take it from here, that would be wonderful.
So hi everyone, I'm Katie Stidolph. I'm just going to quickly put my slides on and then share my story with you guys. So bear with me for one moment. Okay, can everyone hear me and see my slides? Okay, I cannot hear you for some reason. Can someone post in the chat if you can hear me, and then I'll be able to tell?
We can hear you.
We can hear you loud and clear, Katie. Everyone's
we do see you and hear. We see your slides and we hear you.
Right, great. So hi, I'm Katie Stidolph. I'm online. You'll find me as the Savvy Stoic, and that's because Stoicism has had a profound impact on my life, my character, and the way I see the world. So I'm going to share with you a really short story. I know I only have a few minutes, about finding the courage to do the right thing. Oh, that didn't work. So the Stoics created a detailed taxonomy of virtue, which you can see here, and today our focus is on courage, which is subdivided into endurance, confidence, high-mindedness, cheerfulness, and industriousness. So my Stoic story begins at the end of 2017, and this was quite a difficult time for me in my life as my mum wasn't very well. She had COPD, which is a progressive disease, and she was in the final stages of this. And it was during this time that we found out she had just under a year to live. But thankfully, this was also the time that I found Stoic philosophy, so it was really, really beneficial for me during this difficult time. And I did so by coming across a video by Tim Ferriss called How to Apply Stoic Philosophy to Your Life. Within this video, he talks about Seneca's letters to Lucilius, which if you haven't read or listened to, I highly recommend checking them out. They're really, really great, filled with amazing passages. And one that really stood out to me is from letter 13, when Seneca said, there are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And Seneca's letters and all of the Stoic philosophy that I was sort of delving into at this time to really help me endure this difficult situation. It also gave me confidence that I was going to get through it, which was really important, and allowed me to find cheerfulness in amongst all of the difficult moments that I was going through. So my courageous choice came on the 24th of May in 2018 when I got a call from my brother saying that I should head to the hospital as Mum wasn't very well. So I arrived, we got taken into a small room, and the doctor said there was nothing else that they could do for Mum. They'd put her in an induced coma and she was on a ventilator. And then they asked that dreaded question, well, what do you want to do from here? And I remember just sort of taking it all in for a few moments and really just sort of rationalizing everything that was going on, and then asking the doctor, can she feel anything? Like, is she fully unconscious? And the doctor reassured me and said, yes, she's fully unconscious. She cannot feel anything. She's not suffering. So I took a few minutes to sort of go off by myself and really just sit and think about what I should do, all the Stoicism that I delved into had really helped me up to this point, especially the dichotomy of control and all of Seneca's letters. But I knew what the right thing to do was. I just didn't want to have to be the person to do it. But after a few moments of really thinking about it and understanding the gravity of the choice that I had in my hands, I knew what I had to do. So we decided to take Mum off her ventilator and let her go peacefully. And if it wasn't for finding Stoicism at this point and also having the courage to know that that was the right decision, I was so steadfast that I knew that I didn't want to do that, but I knew it was the right thing to do. So the Stoic courage helped me. It's also allowed me to look back and not regret it, which I'm really grateful for. So my 4 key takeaways is: remember that you are mortal. Marcus Aurelius says you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. So make sure that you live the life that you want to do. You find the courage to do that, because every day your opportunity to do that is slowly running out. Secondly, let the people you care about know this. It's so easy in this busy, fast-paced world just to not tell the people that you care about that you do. But in reality, you don't know when your last day is going to be here. Casey mentioned memento mori, right? Like, that's such a fundamental Stoic concept. So just let the people that are important to you in your life know that. Third, difficulties in life improve our character. So every little courageous decision that you make is going to make that next one just that little bit easier. Seneca says, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. And lastly, doing the right thing always takes courage. So thanks so much for listening, and if you want to get in touch, head to my website, thesavvystoic.com, send me an email. I'm on all the social channels, and if you're in my breakout room, then I'm looking forward to chatting to you. So thanks so much. How do I stop there?
Katie, thank you. Thank you for sharing that powerful story. I know we're all going to have a lot of great stories shared. I'm going to mute you, Katie. Great. So again, thank you for that powerful story and for sharing the conversation. I do see a lot of comments in the chat. Great feedback. We do know that there's some sound issues that can happen, right? So just trust that we are recording this and we will continue in the conversation, and hopefully you'll hear more than you don't hear. So the next person I'd like to call on to introduce themselves is Tim LeBon. So Tim, if you could take it away.
Hello there. Can you all hear me? Brilliant. So I'm a CBT therapist. I'm also a founder member of Modern Stoicism, and we're running Stoic Week in October later this month. Now, we've just heard from Katie and are going to hear lots of other really awe-inspiring stories of what I call great courage, where we face really difficult situations and we show great courage. And such acts are truly admirable and important. I've just finished writing a book, 365 Ways to Be More Stoic, with Casey, who we heard from's wonderful editorial assistance. And that's got a whole chapter on courage with quite a lot of examples. And so I had the thought, which story do I want to share? And I've chosen for us today a personal story, and it's actually one which doesn't involve me risking serious injuries or even losing my job, because I believe that we all have the opportunity to show courage every single day. And it's every time we do the right thing, even though that might be uncomfortable. And it's the courage that Marcus Aurelius showed in Book 5, Paragraph 1 of Meditations. You might remember it. It's the passage where he shares with us the difficulty he had getting out of bed every morning. And that is an example of courage, to do the right thing, even though it's uncomfortable. So here's my small personal example of one type of courage. It's called the lawnmower story. And I wonder if it's relevant for you, or whether it's just me and Marcus that find trouble with things like this. So one evening, I returned home from a long day in the NHS, exhausted, and I went straight to the sofa, flicking through TV channels and contemplating going to the sweet cabinet and getting a snack and probably having a nap. But then a little voice of caution said something. You know how this will end up, Tim. It's happened before. You'll raid the sweet cabinet and spend the evening watching junk TV. Well, what could I do instead? And it so turned out the answer was staring me right in the face. Through the French windows, I could see our lawn getting somewhat out of control. Now, I know from experience and from what I tell my clients when I do CBT, that the best way to beat mental fatigue is through physical exercise. But mowing the lawn, the whole lawn, seemed really daunting, too much. And my inner Homer Simpson would have won if that had been the task I'd set myself. But making a start was doable. So I got off my backside and started mowing. After a few minutes, I felt more energized and mowed a bit more, and then a bit more. And what do you know, half an hour later, the whole lawn was mowed. I was physically tired, but mentally refreshed and proud of myself too, which I think is how we feel when we've done the right thing. It wasn't difficult to mow the lawn, looking back on it. I just needed the wisdom to understand my limitations and the courage to take that first baby step to do the right thing, even though it wasn't what my inner Homer Simpson wanted to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. What a great story. It's important, I think, to remember that courage is in the everyday moment, right? Not just the huge and glorious tasks. So excellent. Thank you for that. The next person that I'll call on is Lydia. Lydia, if you could take yourself off mute and share your story.
I think I did it. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Hello, all. My name is Lydia Scratch, and I'm a sweary Stoic coach who works with clients to help them calm the F down using tried and tested Stoic techniques. So I've had clients all over the world, and when I talk about courage with my clients, it's never in the context of doing big, brave things that have major impacts. It's in the context of them admitting that they aren't happy with their lives. And that is how courage shows up in my coaching, by creating space for my clients to admit something they're afraid to admit for fear their lives will start unraveling. In Ryan Holiday's book, Courage is Calling, he quotes Winston Churchill. To each there comes in their lifetime a special moment when they are figuratively tapped on the shoulder and offered the chance to do a very special thing, unique to them and fitted to their talents. What a tragedy if that moment finds them unprepared or unqualified for that which could have been their finest hour. When this happens, when we're tapped on the shoulder and given the opportunity to be our finest, it takes courage to listen and courage to say yes. That opportunity presented itself to me some time ago when I realized I had a drinking problem. But it wasn't a little tap on the shoulder. It was a roaring voice saying, "What the F are you doing?" Here's some quick background. I got through the first 3 decades of my life dimming myself and my needs in order to be the responsible one and deal with what I perceived to be the more important things. My parents, my husband, my kids, my siblings, my role in community organizations, and my career. I became so adept at dimming my own needs with alcohol that I didn't even know I had needs. I was caught up in my personal misery. I was a victim of my own life. And then I read in a book that it might not be your fault that your life sucks, but it is your responsibility to deal with it. Well, and this is when I knew I needed courage. Not the courage of slaying dragons or leading platoons into battle. Instead, I needed the courage to not drink. And even more important than that was the courage I needed to deal with what drove me to numb through drinking. I'd been numbing misery and victimhood, and to be clear, this was private suffering. I hid my numbing. From the outside, I was a happy wife, mom, sister, volunteer, employee. And my courageous turn let me admit that I wasn't happy. And believe me, it took courage. So enter Stoicism. Epictetus wrote, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens the way it happens, and then you will be happy." It takes courage to stop fighting life and all the shit it can throw at you. Courage to look at life and accept it. To treat everything that happens as something to be embraced, not avoided. Because it happened, and we can't make whatever it is unhappen. Life can suck. Accept it and take responsibility to deal with it well. When I was in active recovery, the Serenity Prayer, made popular through Alcoholics Anonymous and completely informed by Stoicism, became a constant refrain in my mind. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. I changed my job, I divorced my husband, I resigned from community organizations. Basically, I walked away from that which was making me numb. Quick sidebar, quitting isn't always the wrong thing to do. People who generalize on social media that you should never give up, never quit, are wrong, and I will fight anyone on it. So I can give my clients space to admit something they're afraid to admit for fear their lives will start unraveling, because I gave myself that space. And this takes courage. The quiet courage, too, as Marcus wrote, get active in my own rescue. I was tapped on the shoulder and took the opportunity to do a very special thing, unique to me and fitted to my talent. And what a tragedy it would have been if that moment found me unprepared for that which could have been my finest hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. I appreciate you sharing that story. What a great reminder that we can only do our best work when we're there for ourselves. So thank you for sharing that. The next person I'm going to call on is Scott Perry. Scott, if you could take yourself off mute.
Thanks very much, Andi. Yeah, it's really, I'm just very grateful to be here. I've really enjoyed all the presenters, and thank you, Catherine and Brittany, for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be here. So I am an Encore life coach, which means that I help people roughly my age hear and heed the call of vocation and define and deliver the difference only they can make in their life's third act. I think this is a really courageous thing for people to do. And I didn't really come with a story in mind, but as Chris was talking, just quick sidebar, Chris Gill is the man I hope to become when I grow up. Unfortunately, growing older is required, and growing up is an option I haven't really executed yet. But when he was talking about his dad putting out the person on fire, I was really struck by that, because I've been thinking a lot about courage and how, one of the things that we do as coaches and one of the practices of Stoicism is helping just be grateful for the things that you already have, that you are sufficient as you are, even as you strive to be and do more and better with and for people you care about. And I think courage can be just this basic intuition or instinct that all human beings have. And I was reminded of this in January when my grandson Jasper was born. He was due in late April. He was born in early January, so 3 months early, spending his first 3 months of life in a NICU unit, and unable to be visited by his parents who had contracted COVID. So my wife and I became the primary caregivers for the first couple of weeks of his life. And I've never seen so much courage displayed, not just by an infant who was certainly not conscious that he was summoning courage, but was practicing it in every breath that he was taking, but also just in the everyday courage of, the nurses who courageously told us that he had a 50-50 chance of making it, and if he made it past the first couple of weeks, it was likely his chances would continue to improve. And just, the courage to connect in any way we could. My wife and I spent endless hours singing to him just to let him know that he was not alone and that we were there. And sort of to Tim's point, I think, this is what courage is. It's not the heroic dragon slaying. It is the will to explore the edges of your understanding and abilities, to face fears, dangers, obstacles, and take the smallest possible step that you can into potential, into possibility. It's not the absence of courage. I don't think it's the antidote of or opposite of fear. I think the opposite of fear is actually love, and it takes a lot of courage to embrace and love from the inside out, to speak a little bit to Casey's presentation on, codependence can be overcome when you start first by loving yourself enough to love other people in a way that promotes everyone's health and happiness. So a little bit of a ramble, but that's my way, and those are a few thoughts I have on courage.
Scott, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing something that I think is evident in the comments in the chat, but also in everything that our panelists who've already spoken have shared, and that is a willingness to be vulnerable about those moments where you're called to express courage or experience courage, or, as you said, witness it in others and have that profoundly impact you, as you did with the nurses and the NICU. So thank you for that. The next person I will call on is Nona. Nona, if you could take yourself off mute and share your story.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Wow, it's been very powerful so far. And I did have another story I was going to say, but in light of what Casey presented, I am going to share with you what actually lack of courage and codependence can do to a person. But before I do that, I'm supposed to tell you who I am. So I'm on the New England Stoic board. I run the Women's Philosophers Cafe every fourth Sunday. So if you'd like to join me there, you can get the link through Meetup and the New England Stoics. Then what I do is create a nice community for women to share and learn about how to be a practicing Stoic and why the value in life for them is, it's not just about a leadership. Well, it is, but it's leadership of yourself first. And women feeling safe to discuss in women's energy, but with the hope that they feel more comfortable to matriculate with the whole group and create more community with no matter whatever gender we are. So that's how I kind of started that. And by the way, it was with the help of Brittany Pollitt, who was my little bit of my mentor and coach in that direction. So thank you, Brittany. It's been very successful. The other aspect of who I am is I'm a riding dressage instructor coach. And I'm going to tell you right now, Stoicism has helped me deal with many of the aspects of being a good professional, to deal with people and their creatures and their goals and desires in a very, I think, a very way that promotes that the horse is just a medium by which I use to be a good influence in people's lives. Yes, I teach them what they come to me to pay me for, but there's always a greater goal. So before I share my story, I would like to quote one of the most famous courageous characters of maybe some of our time, and whom I resemble very much, the Cowardly Lion. So he says, courage. What makes a king out of a slave? Courage. What makes the flag on the mast to wave? Courage. What makes the elephant charge his tusk in the misty mist of the dusky dusk? Courage. What makes the muskrat gut his musk? Courage. So courage is essential, as we're hearing from everybody. And I really think, as it is one of the virtues, the axioms of virtue, as Katie let us know in her very good presentation, and I'm glad she launched it first because it hashed it all out, that without courage, the rest of what we strive to do really just stays in a philosophical realm. Courage is that which allows us to implement the activation of this great philosophy that can navigate in peace and tranquility through the storm. So quickly, I will just say, Casey, you probably could be my stoical daughter. I came into life pretty much in a situation where I was a codependent. Parents raised me to be a codependent. They died when I was very young, so to say, 35. I married the wrong person, tried to set up a codependent marriage, then fell victim to a very violent relationship, which I basically created by having someone dependent on me because I was going to set them up to succeed. Because, see, a codependent is not only altruistic, they are also controlling because we have a need in fear. It's from fear of abandonment, fear of all of those things that we won't be who we should be and have the life that we hope we have. So we think in through an altruistic point of view. And we really believe that. It's not something that, we do because we are manipulative. It's not at all. The only person we're really manipulating is ourselves. But within that, found myself in a very dangerous situation. I was very lucky to live through it. So lack of courage almost cost me my life. After that, just like being chased by a bear or anything else, that facing a hurricane that you could lose everything and your life, all of those situations, I think, really do make us hone in on that which we are not executing in our own life to make us the people that we came here to be. So that sent me to therapy, sent me to discover why I was in this cycle of doing what I did, because I really thought I was a wonderful person with what I did, only to learn that in each scenario, I was in the picture. And how that had to change for me to create the life that I now have. And just like Lydia, I will tell you, I would never change that path because what I have learned from it has now made me a little bit of a guru for those who come, because we can see in a much bigger way, because why? We did it, and our goal is, as we learn as good Stoics and a Stoa that we create around us, if we're allowed, is the younger people we would come into our fold, maybe we can teach them a little bit faster than we learned it. And then they're a great productive piece of that Heracles cycle, right? Themselves,
Thank you,
family,
Nona.
and friends. So I'm done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great point then, intergenerational sharing. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about the Stoa and this fellowship is just the fact that we all bring to bear our experiences and many ages, many places of being. So thank you for that. The next person I'm going to call on is Simon Drew. Simon?
Hey, everybody. Sometimes it takes a bit of courage to say you love somebody. Nona, we got to speak yesterday. I adore you. Isn't she wonderful? Everybody, my name is Simon Drew. Some of you will perhaps know me from the Practical Stoic podcast, which is now the Walled Garden podcast. I've been sharing Stoicism around the world for a few years now. And I'm a poet, I'm a musician, I'm an Australian. But if you do hear any music behind me, I'm actually now here in Southern California living with my wife and managing a small music studio down here in Tustin, which is a very new development. But and then co-founder of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society, where we're kind of bringing together a bunch of incredible philosophers and seekers from around the world. So I think that probably many of us coaches here can agree that the coaching industry is about as seedy as it gets, about as broken as it can get. It's often built on the premise of, okay, we're going to get as many people as we can to this web page here, and I'm going to tell you all of the problems that you have, and then I'm going to tell you that it can all be solved with this $2,000 5-week package with me, the guru, the expert. And I want to share a quote with you that I actually share with every single one of my new students, clients, friends, whatever you would call the people I work with. And this quote will prove to you that it's not that easy to market what it is that I do. And it's a quote from Seneca. I've been extremely influenced by Seneca and his courage. So he says, "I am not so persistent that I will seek out cures while I am sick, but I will talk to you about our common suffering and share remedies as if I am lying in the same hospital. So listen to me as though I am talking to myself. I will let you into my intimate thoughts and reckon up with myself in your company." The reason I share that passage with everybody who I meet for the first time in my mentoring practice is because I find it very difficult to present myself as an expert or a guru or somebody who has all of the answers for your life, and I just like to set the tone from the start to say, you're dealing with addiction on and off. Oh man, I've had that before as well, and still on and off. You are dealing with suffering in your soul over the inevitable challenges that we're all facing in this chaotic, fragmented time. Oh my gosh, me too. Let's talk about it. You deal with relationship issues on a daily basis. I'm surrounded by people, and that's always going to be bringing relationship issues with everybody. It's like we all have illnesses in our soul. We are all slaves, just like the Stoics talked about, to something. And I think that it takes real courage for two people to come together in a mutual showing of vulnerability to say, neither of us have the answers for each other's lives, but it's in that dialogue, it's in the wrestling that we do together that really the soul is cured. The illnesses of our soul, like Seneca talked about, they are cured, or at least remedied. And so that's the courage that I try to seek with people is, let's just drop all of this idea like you're coming to me for all of this advice on your life. Please, let's just talk, and the magic really, really happens. So I'll leave it there. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do anything from here.
Thank you, Simon. Great point. Thanks, Simon. Appreciate it. Excellent points about collaboration, conversation, the meaningful exchanges that occur when we really talk and listen to one another. Our next and last panelist to speak right now, before we go into the exciting element of the breakouts, is Matt Sharpe. And Matt, I understand you have some slides to share, or at least a screen share. So go ahead and take that on, and we're ready if you unmute yourself and share your screen.
So I've interviewed about 60 or 70, or read about 60 or 70 cases of adult bullying over the last 2 years in connection with a book that I've just written. So I just wanted to really, hang on, I'll just put this on. Rather than going into anyone's story, just kind of put you in the picture about the kind of courage that many of these people, that all of them are called upon, and many of them undertake. So all adult bullying involves targets at some point, often shortly after the arrival of a new colleague or manager, increasingly facing forms of direct and indirect attacks on their professional capacities, their reputations, and therefore their careers, and by implication, their own material well-being and that of their loved ones. Often, as you'll know, there's direct baiting and insults, but there's also often the use of personal, non-work information against them in work settings. Research bears out that the most common forms of workplace bullying are basically forms of backstabbing and slander, including false accusations of misconduct to managers, which throw them under the bus. Meanwhile, as we've been hearing, sadly, most third parties at this stage turn away, leaving the target isolated. So you can understand that bullying targets amongst all the cohorts out there, and we've been hearing about many different, and we all need courage, but certainly this cohort needs courage. Firstly, the courage, as we've been hearing a lot about, which is a quiet courage to handle negative emotions. Targets often are bombarded by emotions they may have never felt before as an adult. Confusion, anxiety, fear, grief, as well as deep rage and outrage. They need to handle stress and not let justified suspicions of others pass over into unbounded distrust, which will then be used against them. And they need to hold on to the sense that no matter what the bastards do outside of them, they are bigger and more and other than what the slanderers are saying. That's the biggest thing, and I think probably the biggest predictor of a relatively successful sort of story, and Stoicism is all about it. Secondly, targets need to show courage to stand up to what's happening to them. If it becomes clear that directly challenging the instigators is impossible within the workplace, they need the courage to seek out other avenues of assistance in which they can finally present what is taking place and their side of the story. They'll also need courage in such forums to face up to the continuing denials of wrongdoing by the instigators and their enablers, as well as the invariant gaslighting defence known as DAVO in the literature, basically reversing victim and offender. So let me close by citing Rudyard Kipling's If, which I use as an epigraph for the book. Its first verse, I think, sums up the Stoic courage bullying targets need perfectly. If you can keep your head when all others about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired of waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, then that seems to me to be the most perfect description imaginable of what Stoic courage is like for these people. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you to all of our panelists. What a great way to sort of introduce what's going to happen next, which I know we're all very excited about. A little bit of a brief overview of what the breakout sessions will look like. So they'll be for 30 minutes. You'll automatically be assigned a room to join. And in that room, you will find one or possibly two of the coaches that you've heard from today. You will have the option of keeping your video off if you want. You can go off mute. Each facilitator or pair of coaches or individual coach will tell you kind of what to expect at the top of the breakout. They're different based on various strengths and interests and things like that. So I'm sure that you'll have great value, you'll find great value in doing the activities that are suggested. We're going to give you sort of an alert when there's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and 3 minutes left. And then we're going to come back to this big room, this big Zoom room, and share some takeaways. There's a couple of exciting announcements. There'll be some prompts for you to respond to collectively as a large group. So I know you're going to enjoy this next section. And if it's your style to just kind of hang back, stay off video, muted, and just listen, that's more than welcome. No one should feel forced to share, but sharing is indeed an option if that's what you choose. So with that, Catherine's going to push the breakout forward. You'll start to see a little message that pops up and you just click join and you'll go right into the room and find your fellows there. So enjoy the next 30 minutes and we will see you in a bit. Thank you so much.
All right, well, welcome back, everyone. It looks like we are all back in the room. And I'm just going to start slowly spotlighting everyone again. Andi, I'll hand it over to you to bring everyone back and let's see what happens out there for you.
Yeah, great. It sounds like really powerful moments, right? Just from those few folks that have shared. So we're going to ask our coaches to report back on some of the things that happened that I'm going to call on each of our panelists again. And if you could summarize, maybe in a word or three, one of the sort of highlighted features or maybe in a theme that emerged, something that captures what your experience in your breakouts was about, that would be amazing. And I know some folks were paired up. So if I do call on you and you were paired with someone else, please just speak on both of your behalfs and let me know who the other person that your partner was, and then I'll call on them next, or you can call on them next, just to kind of round it out. So, excuse me. Lydia, if I could start with you, please.
Sure thing. Again, these breakout sessions are never quite as long as we would want them to be. There were some amazing stories, but I'm just going to say what totally lifted me up was the story of the courage of persistence. And Matt, I don't know what you would want to share with that, but it's just are amazing.
It just shows, I mean, in every room of 20 or 30 people, I mean, everyone has a story, and some of the stories we heard, I'm sure that other rooms the same, are really quite amazing and inspiring in terms of resilience, and people facing up to incredibly big life challenges. And, I think, often with a great courage model that Tim was talking about, we sort of think only great people or important people do courageous things, and that's, as we say down under, BS. But there's a lot of it around if we can be open to it. So it's been really wonderful for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt and Lydia. Scott, if I could call on you next, please.
Well, courage was practiced by everyone in the room because they were stuck with just me as the coach in the room. So just thank you all for putting up and showing up and sharing. There are folks that were in that room that are sharing takeaways in the chat there, and it's really heartwarming and great to see that. But what I think my biggest takeaway from the conversation was everyone's willingness to start to wrap their heads around this idea that they could step into, stand, and share their power to start taking control over their courage story, their inner narrative. And what we did to facilitate that was to reference the Marcus Aurelius quote, "Think of yourself as dead, you have lived your life, now take what is left and live it properly." And so we started with, if today was your dying day, what would that conversation sound like? What would be the things that you celebrate, that you want to do more of? What are the things that you would regret, that you would like to have done less of or done differently? And just really appreciate everyone's participation and sharing their stories.
Thank you, Scott. And I'm sure it was a treat for those that were alone with you, in no way suffering. Nona, could I call on you next?
Yeah, with Simon and I, and I think ours was pretty intense with dealing with folks that have dealt with illness or are dealing with or terminal illness and progressive illness, but also someone that's dealing with how to just be oneself. And no matter whether it's the beginning of your life or in the middle of your life or you're nearing the end of your life, that being yourself is probably the biggest gift you can give anybody. What do you think, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, we had, like Nona said, we had a very wide spectrum of experiences, from showing up in a certain way at work, dealing with a certain person with courage, right up to facing a terminal diagnosis, and what's the wisdom that we call upon. And I just, to everybody who we were working with and to everybody who we're talking to now, I would say, remember that no matter how large or small you think your example of courage is courage is courage is courage is courage is courage, in the same way that virtue is virtue, in the same way that wisdom is wisdom. It doesn't matter how big or small you think your act of courage is, it's always courage. And that's what we're after. So thank you to everybody who shared. That was just so beautiful.
Thank you so much to both of you. I see a lot of echoes of that sentiment in the chat, and it seems like, if you're not reading the chat, make sure that you do. There's really great feedback there. Thank you, Simon and Nona. Tim, if I could ask you to speak next.
Thank you, Andi. So I was with Katie, and there was so much that was shared in our group. I'll just pick perhaps a couple. One is the idea that we should listen to the right voices, our own voice of wisdom and courage and virtue, but also to be careful about other people, what they say. They might mean well or they might not mean well, but sometimes that's an influence, or it might not be what they've said. It might be just how we've been taught. So it's to stand up for courage. Yeah, I think that's the one that'll stay with me. Katie, I don't know what you'd pick.
Yeah, there was so many amazing stories and all, so thank you to everyone who shared it. I mean, Alison's story of going to an Ivy League school when she had a 2-month-old baby and finding the courage to do that when other people didn't think she could. I really like Star's example of leaning into courage. She has a motto: if I'm afraid of something, I have to do it. And I absolutely love that, right? Because I mean, the virtue of courage, all of us are Stoics, gives us the opportunity to not run away from these scary situations and to see it as fuel for the fire, as Marcus Aurelius says, right? It's an opportunity to practice virtue and get better each and every day. And just on a final note, we really touched on how it doesn't matter whether it's a big act of courage or a small act of courage. And we talked about how Zeno said well-being is realized in small steps, right? But it's truly no small thing. So that's something that I want to leave everyone with. Just, you might think that your act of courage is not an act of courage because it's something really small, but if you're showing up and you're putting the work in and it feels like, well, you're doing it, then it is an act of courage. So yeah, there's just so many amazing stories. So thank you to everyone in our room.
Thank you both, Kitty and Tim. Last but certainly not least, Linda and Brittany.
Hey, yes, again, brilliant stories, courageous sharing. I think some of the key points raised in ours was the ordinariness of courage, of the everyday ordinary things, not the big heroic things. And, the courage to not only take action, but to stand still when we have to persevere, to stay in situations that we might run away from. The courage to walk away from a good deal, like a great job and career, in order to embrace the unknown. And the courage that we need also to age and to let go of our physical capabilities. And how do we do that, courageously? That was some of the key themes in our room.
Thank you, Linda.
So thank you to everybody. I don't know if Brittany's got anything to add.
Brittany's not with us right now, but I think you did a great job summarizing. So thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
That's excellent. I just want to say thank you to Brittany and Catherine for inviting me to host this panel. It was a real pleasure to spend time with everyone in the Zoom space, but also this group of coaches, just really phenomenal people. And there's an excellent opportunity to work more closely with them. I just wanted to remind everyone that there is still time to donate for an entry to win a coaching call with one of our coaches. There'll be a link that drops into the chat if you haven't seen it already. It sounds like everyone was very generous with their time, with their thinking. And on behalf of the entire panel, thank you to all the participants in the breakouts for everything that you brought to that conversation. I'm sure that friendships were made and connections were formed, and many of you will stay in touch after. We're going to take another quick break, give you the opportunity to have a little stretch.
Before we do, sure. I have an announcement.
Okay, Catherine.
But before I make my announcement, before we go on a break, I do want to thank everyone on this coaching panel. It was moving, it was informative, it was helpful, it was human. Thank you, Andi, for moderating. Scott Perry, thank you for joining us. Matt Sharpe, lovely to see you, matey. Linda Bebbington, thank you for powering through the tech. Katie Stidolph, thank you so much for joining us and lovely to meet you finally. Tim LeBon, as always, what a pleasure. Lydia Scratch, thank you for being so sweary. Simon Drew, it's wonderful to have you here. And Nona, you're the star. We love you. All right. Well, thank you so much. Before you go, I'm going to make one more announcement.